Welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. It's Wednesday. Dominic, that means this episode is just a bit extra special. Episode 125 of the MMA podcast. I don't know, I kind of struggled to carry that one over, but
it's all right.
Dominic, how you feeling, my friend? Obviously, in case you can't tell, new quarters for this guy right here. Who's got two thumbs and moved yesterday? This guy.
And now he has two sore thumbs.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Oh, man, I'm doing good. Happy to have you back here on this Wednesday. It's hump day, halfway through the work week, halfway through the week. We've got a great episode in store, as always. The Reddit Roundtables, they always deliver. It's your baby, so I know you're excited as well. Noah, you have to give us just a little scoop of the moving action before we get into the MMA action.
I thought it went pretty smoothly once the actual moving took place. Dominic knows what I'm kind of referring to behind the scenes. I won't talk about that for legal.
That shall rename,
no, just kidding. But in all seriousness, shout out to a couple of my good friends, Tyler and Caleb. They came and helped me. I am dealing with a pretty bad back at the moment, so in terms of how much I was actually helping, probably not as much as you would think, because I'm the biggest of the three of us. And
you were directing traffic.
I was moving a lot of the smaller stuff while they were handling the couch, and
yes,
which Dominic has also moved these items because
it's not fun.
I basically threw a stack of cash at him and said, "Give me all your furniture."
Yes.
So that couch was a bitch.
Yes, it is.
My friends will tell you that. But I thought it went pretty well. I mean, I hate moving. I said this a little bit on Monday, but guys, seriously, I hate moving. I try not to be a negative Nancy, but I can't help it. There are not many things in this world that I hate. Moving tops that list. It's just such a drag. And when you're dealing with an injury like I am, it just makes it even worse because you have to use your back so much in lifting. But we got pretty much everything unpacked last night. I was a sweaty mess. It was like midnight. Took my first shower in the new house. Then I went straight to bed. Woke up at like 7:45 this morning for work. Didn't wake up once in the middle of the night.
Ooh.
That was the first. It was an interesting night. I will say the one downside to this apartment compared to the old stomping grounds me and Dominic shared is the lack of air conditioning.
Oh,
which
no.
I hope I'll have to find out when I listen back to this episode. I do have a fan going on.
I'm not picking up nothing.
It's a little bit away from my camera at this point because I moved over here before we started. So hopefully you guys won't be hearing that too much. But it surprisingly wasn't near as warm as I thought it would be. I'll put it that way.
Oh, that's good.
Now, I guess that's enough talk about moving. So let's move into the topic at hand. Yeah, the topic at hand today is the MMA Reddit Roundtable. For those of you that don't know, well, now you do. It's sorry, Dana, trademark.
Yes, trademark pending.
So the Reddit Roundtable is essentially me and Dominic have scoured the internet. We have went through Reddit, hence the name, but also Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, anywhere that people talk MMA. We are a fly on the wall, eavesdropping to those conversations, looking for what topics are interesting to the community the most, what questions are being asked. And then in this format, we put those questions all together in a nice little list, and we go one by one and give our thoughts on them.
Yeah.
The hope of this, and just to be completely transparent, a lot of people would probably
let them know.
Shield from this fact, but the whole point is for this concept to eventually just turn into our own sort of Q&A segment, maybe a bi-weekly or once a month Q&A segment where me and Dominic would answer your fan questions. And we do have one fan question on this episode, so shout out to our good – I was going to say our number one fan, but I feel like that's just like we know the guy. So, like, I feel like that's – So, shout out to Michael for sending a question. We'll be getting to his at the very end. But yeah, I would like to at some point we do all of these. Just
All
be
10, 12 of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just get right into it, Dominic. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Number one, you'll notice that since we haven't done one of these in, I guess, a little over a month or at this point.
Close to a month, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point. Some of these will involve like the McGregor Poirier stuff, and you'll notice that. But I mean, there are more questions at the end that kind of are more up to date, I guess,
Yeah.
like what's going on. So number one involves 10-8 rounds. For those of you maybe that don't know, I feel like you probably should. MMA is scored just like boxing, where it's a 10-point must system. The winner of any given round must be awarded 10 points. The loser of that round, according to the judge scoring it, gives them 9 or less. Usually 9. 8 is supposed to be a bit of an ass whooping.
Yeah.
This has led to a lot of problems in the scoring of fights. You hear a lot of complaints about fights being scored. It's not a very intuitive system. The difference between different 10-9 rounds is so much of a contrast that it just doesn't really take into account everything. But 10-8 rounds are one thing that when MMA was first really developing this system, or I guess taking this system from boxing, 10-8 rounds were very rare, very hard to come by. But they have tweaked the rules around enough to where they have tried to make it more plausible for a 10-8 round to happen, more realistic. Like, sure, does it still need to be an ass whooping? Yes, but not necessarily to the extent of nearly the fight being finished or anything like that. It's just more so like you dominated your opponent in that round. So the point being that they want to see more variance in the scorecards, which is, I think their heads or hearts in the right place. But recently in the last few months, we've had a couple examples of 10-8 rounds on judges' scorecards that, while it didn't end up really mattering, are worth noting. And that being two big lightweight main events, UFC 262, where Michael Chandler would lose to Charles Oliveira. You saw what we believe to be a first round that was very back and forth, a round that Michael Chandler won, and he did definitely put a stamp on the end of that round by nearly finishing Oliveira. But Oliveira had taken Chandler down, had his back for at least a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Yeah, threatened to choke.
Yeah, I mean and yet 2 of the 3 judges gave Chandler a 10-8 round.
I forgot.
Oliveira would obviously end up winning that fight, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah,
but still worth noting. Then you have the Dustin Poirier Conor McGregor fight, where despite we truthfully have been a little poo-poo on McGregor on this show, but I think rightfully so. But then in this fight, I kind of have to almost come to his defense, because you saw a similar scorecards where I believe it was 2 of the 3 judges gave Dustin a 10-8 round in that first round, despite what most would probably evaluate as, yes, a Dustin round, a round he won, but not necessarily completely one-sided, I don't think, either.
Right.
So I guess the question here is, are 10-8 rounds getting out of hand? Do you think that are we turning to 10-8 rounds and judges scoring turning into a bit of the old West where anything goes, Dominic, and there's no rules? And what are your thoughts on this? And maybe the 2 examples I gave, how did you feel about those?
I think it's a topic that's really just riding a thin, fine line right now, because I think it's, on one hand, a good thing that they're becoming more popular and prominent than they once were, because you want to reward these guys when they do go out and dominate a round, dominate their opponent, melt the will away from their opponent, like Khabib has done, so on and so forth. However, we also can't just be thrown around like candy on Halloween either. So it really, and that's the thing too, there's always different judges at these fights, and the different states and the commissions and the rules. There's not one unified rule set for all 50 states, which makes things more difficult. So out of hand right now, no, just because we're still in that time frame of they're becoming more prominent and popular. However, if it keeps going down this path, because we're seeing them once or twice per card, it seems like nowadays, or at least around that, hovering around that area. So if it keeps going in this direction, then it could get out of hand. So there's just, like I said at the beginning, a fine line that needs to be followed here. A clear domination, 10-8. If you're on the fence and you're a judge and you're like, ooh, was it a 10-8? Was it a 10-9? Probably just scored a 10-9, you know what I'm saying? So, and then the two fights that you brought up as examples, I totally had forgotten that two judges scored that in Chandler's favor as a 10-8. That was crazy to me, being that Oliveira did have his back, threatened a submission for like 1.5, 2 minutes. And then Chandler obviously nearly finished the fight at the end of the round. The Dustin-Conor one's interesting because Dustin seemingly had a round close to what Khabib did when he fought Conor. However, Conor threatened with the guillotine choke against Dustin. It was in very tight. He landed pretty solid elbows from the bottom. So as big of a fan I am of Dustin, that is closer to a 10-8 in my opinion than Chandler's round. But still, if you're on the fence, you probably go a 10-9 there. But yeah, I'm curious to see what you think as well.
Yeah. I think the wording of this question might be a little extreme because I think it's kind of common in MMA. It seems that people, the fandom, they get very scared of change. So when you start seeing more of these 10-8 rounds pop up, it just becomes a kind of almost human nature for the fan base to be like, oh no, this is going to get out of hand real quick. And I agree that I think in both of these examples, I wouldn't score them a 10-8. I agree with you. Even though Chandler nearly finished the fight, I would still say that 10-8 was more egregious, I guess, than the 10-8 of the Poirier-McGregor fight. A more recent example, one that just happened, was, and this is more on the reverse end, where it was a lack of 10-8s, was, in my opinion, the main event of last Saturday's card between Sean Strickland and Uriah Hall. One judge scored one round a 10-8 for Sean Strickland. But in my opinion, you could have scored multiple rounds of 10-8 in that fight. Nearly finished Uriah multiple times. Nearly just beat him down. Yeah. And to me, there just needs to be, I think, more clarity. Because thankfully, these kind of blunders that are popping up aren't really ruining fights right now, not big fights anyways. But it has the potential to become a problem in the future. I like where trying to implement more 10-8 rounds. Again, I think the people making these decisions, I think their heart's in the right place. I just think there needs to be a more clear description of what a 10-8 round is, because right now I think you got – and it's tough because really you're dealing with judges, humans scoring these fights, and humans are bound to have their own biases or opinions on what's more damaging or what's more effective. That's why you see a lot of controversial scoring in MMA, because you have a lot of boxing judges, for example, who don't really value groundwork if there's no ground and pound involved. That happens quite often. So it's a tough to really give like a blueprint as like, here's the below average Joe solution to this problem. Yeah. But it's still a problem worth addressing because, again, it's not really a problem right now, but I think
you don't want it to get there.
Yeah, you don't want to not talk about it, and then it's too late. It's already here, and it's a problem.
And hurting people's careers.
Ruined the huge fight. You know, that's a big concern.
Yeah.
Number 2. I think we talked enough about that one, don't you think?
Let's go on.
All right. So number 2, this also involves the Conor McGregor Dustin Poirier fight. I thought this one was really interesting. Could I have maybe taken one of these Conor Dustin implicated questions off? Sure, but I really think they're interesting to talk about. So this one might get a little confusing, but walk with me here, Dominic.
Yes.
So we saw the way the fight went down. McGregor snaps his leg. We're not really sure kind of why it happened or how it happened, whether it was a check leg kick or he came in with multiple fractures or whatever it was. He snapped his leg, fight over at the end of the first round. And then you saw what happened after the fight. Dustin felt like he said a win is a win. When they were asking him, like, do you feel good about that one? He's like, I mean, I can't help what happens to my opponent in the octagon, that his leg couldn't hold up. Like, he's like, I can't help that. It's a win is a win.
Yeah.
And I was winning the round. So I think, kind of what we thought, he was winning the round, he won the fight. But Conor obviously felt much differently and was very adamant that the rivalry was not over, that there needs to be another fight, that's not a win, all that. So my question for you is, if Conor and Dustin switched places in this fight, and that's in the outcome, fight happens the same way, except Dustin's leg snaps at the very end of the round. And I mean the same way, where Dustin is Conor is winning.
Controlling the round.
Let's say Conor is winning the round. Dustin snaps his leg, just switch spots completely. Okay. If that happens and Dustin snaps his leg, fight over, Conor McGregor wins, what would Conor's response be to this? What would Dustin's response be? Would the UFC even talk about a fourth fight? No. That's what I want to ask you.
Well, Conor's response, I think, would be pretty similar to, honestly, what Dustin's was, if not a little bit more egregious in terms of the way he talks about the injury, maybe poke some fun at Dustin or something. I don't know. We saw how Conor was during that fight week. That's what leads me to believe that.
Yeah.
Dustin's response, that's interesting, because we know how solid of a competitor he is, but also at the end of the day, he just got the biggest paycheck of his career. He's got the family at home, the hot sauce, building a new house. He's got to go get his leg fixed in surgery. I don't know if – I'm sure the competitive fire and Dustin would say, okay, let's do it again. But I don't know if he would go to the extent that Conor has went to with the pre-fight injury coming in and some of the nasty tweeting and all that crazy stuff. So there would be definitely a difference. But Dustin, I think, would probably still want to run it back again. Would there be talk of a fourth fight from the UFC? No chance. Conor's going straight for the gold belt. And then who knows what they want to do with Conor after that. But, yeah, there's absolutely zero, maybe 0.2% chance that the UFC itself, Dana White, and the matchmakers talk about a fourth fight if the roles were reversed here. That I will stand firmly on this hill.
I agree with you on that last point for sure. I for sure think that, Conor going straight for the belt. I mean, yeah. Dustin, in a sense, Dustin kind of is too. But,
but
I think more so in the sense of, like, I don't think Dana in the post-fight press conference would necessarily be like, well, I guess you run this fight back once Dustin gets healthy. And that's not because I'm not saying that to, like, shit on Dana.
No.
I'm saying that more in the sense that it's just business.
Yeah.
Like Dustin with the loss there, I mean, now maybe we'll start seeing him pull big numbers on his own, kind of like how Habib did get quite a rub from fighting Conor McGregor with that rivalry. And as bad as that rivalry was, as heated as it was, Dustin and Conor's is very comparable.
Yeah.
I think, and that's what's so interesting about when you kind of say what would their responses be, because if Conor would have won, part of me wants to say that he would be much more, I guess, respectful. But okay. I don't know. I don't know, because that fight week was so just venomous, if you will.
Yeah.
And, like, it's almost like asking if Conor had beat Habib, would he have sat there and shook Habib's hand in the middle of the octagon and, like, embraced him? I don't think he would.
Nah.
And I just don't think he would have. I wonder, though, if – I don't know if he would necessarily kick Dustin while he's down. But I think his focus would be purely on title fight next.
Yeah.
I'm coming for you, Oliveira.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And basically would not even give Dustin's name the time of day.
Yeah.
So that, in that sense, I think that's where you see a bit of a difference in Conor's behavior. But for Dustin, his response would be interesting too. I think it would gut him bad.
Yeah.
I mean, for it to end that way, I think he would, if asked, because I'm sure he would be if it happened to him, he would say, yes, I would love to do a fourth fight, but I think he would in his head know that that's very slim.
Yeah.
Maybe say, I'll go earn it,
Yeah.
earn another shot at him. But overall, he said he loves fighting, but doesn't really love a lot of what goes into fighting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much it would actually bother him besides the stinging feeling of just losing that trilogy. But I mean, you got the money, you got the payday, you got the hot sauce going. He's got a good family. Like, I think he would be all right overall. Right. Probably handle it better than Conor did if he was in those shoes.
Yeah, thank goodness that's so far out of a hypothetical there. But it is an interesting topic. I'm glad you found that one.
Mm-hmm. Now, this next one is actually a question that I had proposed for us. We had talked about this a little bit a while back, and this is, again, kind of ties in with the Conor Dustin fallout. Can you think of an example, Dominic, of a fight that ended in an illegitimate win? And this is all opinion-based. So the reason why we said this is because, again, a lot of the Conor McGregor fan base kind of were discounting Dustin's win, saying that it didn't count, that because, again, Conor ultimately, his leg shattered. It wasn't really, as far as we know, it wasn't necessarily anything Dustin did that ended the fight.
Yeah.
But our opinion was that Dustin won the round. And since Conor couldn't continue, a win is a win in that case. You can't take that away from him. You can be upset about it or disappointed, but I think anything beyond that's just kind of having hurt feelings.
Right.
But is there an example of a fight where you really feel like, I don't think this should count as a win?
I might be taking the easy way out here, but it's also just one that's right there, and I'm just reaching out and grabbing it back in. The Aljamain Sterling Petr Yan title fight, and don't get me wrong, it was Petr Yan's fault. It was an illegal knee at the end of the day, a very bad one at that. But a title fight shouldn't change hands that way because of an illegal move. And I know it's such a hard, another fine line, if you will, to cross. But Aljamain came out, looked solid, but then Petr Yan really starts to turn the tide of that fight, and it's really going in his favor as we enter that fourth round. And then out of nowhere, boom, he lands this knee. And I don't know, what do you do to fix it? Do you just rule it a no contest, run it immediately back? Do you, I don't know, strip Yan and make it an interim belt and have him fight again? I don't know. But it just didn't feel right seeing Aljamain get the belt wrapped around him and his hand raised there. And I'm not trying to take any away from Sterling either. He's an incredible fighter. We know he earned his way to that title shot. It's one of those that felt so obvious, and I'm obviously going to go with the one that's right there in my head. So
let me offer, I guess, some more clarity to the question. I'm not necessarily asking if, of an example of a fight where the win should be taken away, under our current structure. I just mean, in your head, you go, that's an illegitimate win. And I mean, that is a good example still.
Yeah.
But not necessarily, I don't know if it's necessarily to the point where we're saying, well, this is what I think should have been done. The win get taken away, legitimately, because that's just not really, that's not very realistic in my opinion.
Right.
I mean, but I agree with you completely. That's a great example, especially, one so recent.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, it's hard because Petr Yan is the cause
at fault. Yeah.
And I think out of a lot of the people that in our shoes, we're more on the I ain't gonna touch that in terms of, do we think Aljo was faking or not faking?
No.
We're look, I ain't going near that talk, because I don't feel like I'm in any place, and you feel the same way to determine a guy that tough in his position if he's faking or not. But surprisingly, a lot of people that are typically very, pro the fighters, pro whatever their feelings are about things, were just kind of this seems fake, which was very shocking, because that's a big allegation to throw at someone in his position.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that even adds a little more to the illegitimacy is when you have people that we consider very credible
Right.
even weighing in and saying, no, that's pretty fake to me. That's that's a tough pill to swallow. My example is going to be another one from this year, and this is another obvious one. Uriah Hall's victory over Chris Weidman. Again, it was an 18-second fight. Weidman threw before the first strike thrown in the fight was a hard leg kick from Weidman. Uriah checked it, leg snaps in half. Again, I mean, Uriah checked the kick. So, I mean, in that sense, I guess.
Right. But when you compare this one to how you explained the Dustin Conor one, maybe go into that and explain why you feel this way more so than the latter.
Good call. So, the reason why I feel like this is much more illegitimate and why I wouldn't consider a Conor Dustin one illegitimate is because in that Uriah Hall Chris Weidman fight, it was 18 seconds. One strike was thrown. It was by Weidman. Yeah. His leg snaps. That there's nothing to go off of in that fight to determine a winner.
Right.
Nothing. If you had to judge that round, you would just be like, I guess Uriah.
Right.
Because he checked the kick. But I mean, seriously, if you let's say his leg didn't shatter, they just for some reason stopped right there. How would you score that fight? You would not. There's no winner of that round, in my opinion. But for Conor Dustin, Dustin had clearly won round one.
You got to see a full 5 minutes.
You saw a full 5 minutes. And I don't know what kind of timing would be enough for me to be like, okay, that's legitimate at this point. I'm not really policing that.
Right.
I'm just saying that I saw enough in that fight to where, unfortunately, Conor's leg snaps. That's an unfortunate circumstance. Not something I would wish on Conor.
Of course.
And again, I would sit here and admit that I would probably assume that it didn't really have anything to do with what Dustin did in the octagon that caused that leg to shatter. But it doesn't matter. I mean, these things happen. It's the fight game. You hear that a lot, but it's true. It's this is humans we're dealing with, and you are fighting in a cage that literally to beat the shit out of each other. Injuries are bound to happen.
Right.
You don't like them to happen in the way that did, but it did. So ultimately you go off of the 5 minutes you saw. If Conor had been winning that round, the way, like, again, if you reversed their at least action in that first round and then Conor's leg snaps, I would say I would be like, run that back.
Yeah.
I would be on Team Conor in that way.
Right.
But as it stands, I don't think you can call it an illegitimate win.
Fair enough.
Question number 4. This involves another lightweight. We're finally kind of moving on. This one's about number 3 ranked Beneil Dariush. Quietly there in the top 5. The question, Dominic, involves that. Is Beneil Dariush being overlooked in terms of potential title challengers, or is his ranking at this point higher than his ceiling?
Okay.
And we're big Beneil fans, so this is a hard one.
Is he being overlooked in terms of being a title challenger by the overall MMA community, population, what it may have you? Yes. Just because he simply earned his way there, a 7-fight win streak. At the end of the day, that's hard to do, especially in this weight class. So in that talk, yes, I think he is being overlooked as a title challenger, being that he earned his way through the toughest division in the sport. However, being ranked 3rd after he beat Tony, I was shocked that he bumped so incredibly high into that top 3. Is his ranking higher than his ceiling? That's the weird thing. As much as I love Beneil, it's his fight style, right? And when I look at guys sometimes, for example, Cyril Gane is fighting this weekend, and we've seen him his whole career in the UFC thus far because it's only been a couple of years. And you look at that guy, and that's a guy I look at, and I think Noah even agrees with me. I look at Cyril Gane fight, and I say that's a future champion. Yes.
Mhm.
Now, again, we're Dariush fans, but when I see Beneil fight, I don't have that same thought in my head. Now, could he? Yes, anybody can become a champion. He's riding the hot streak, 7-fight win streak, tough as nails, but he takes punishment. He takes a beating. He's willing to eat those shots to press forward. And when there's guys that dangerous in this division, guys that hit hard, like Gaethje, like Poirier, even Oliveira's incredible on the feet now too. This division's just so good that's not a style you want to come in with. Now, he did have a good game plan against Tony because I thought those two were just going to be in an absolute dogfight. So if you were to come in, game plan for these guys and do that style of approach, then it's a different story. But the overall history of Beneil's career, if you disregard that Tony fight, is he's going to come in, he's going to be in a dogfight, get in your face, may the best man win. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I tried to kind of separate both spectrums there. But this one, I would really want to hear what you got to say.
No, I think your thoughts were very clear there. I think it's hard to say no that he's being overlooked or not being overlooked. Like he's definitely being overlooked.
Yeah.
If you go off of his ranking, he's ranked third. Anybody else in any other division that's ranked third, they're in talks for a title fight. Well, right now, we're seeing a lot of guys getting matched up. Gaethje and Chandler. There's Oliveira, Dustin. And
Beneil's the last man out.
Islam's fighting RDA.
Yeah.
Beneil's just kind of there. And now some of that might be because, sure, he said he wanted to wait till the beginning of next year to fight. But I think it's more because I think the UFC doesn't really know what to do. Because I'll admit it, I love Beneil Dariush. Do I think he's the, I guess, fourth best lightweight in the world? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. I think you're right. His fight style, the thing that kind of made us really like him, definitely is not the fourth best lightweight in the world.
Right.
But his approach against Tony Ferguson, less fan-friendly for sure, but could potentially carry him higher. And I think that is going to be a similar style you're going to see as long as he's in title contention. I mean, that's a smart way to go if you're Beneil.
Yeah.
Now, is his ranking higher than his ceiling? My opinion, probably yes. I really think he's as good now as he's going to get, which is really good. I mean, I think he's a top 10 lightweight for sure.
Yeah.
But again, he beat Tony Ferguson, which again surprises me that was Tony's third straight loss. I mean, he had not won a round in how many years? I mean, a couple years. It seems like, or maybe he won one round against Gaethje. I don't remember. He'd lost a lot of rounds in a row, taken a lot of damage, been dominated, almost like a Tyron Woodley effect, at this point. It was kind of like, imagine Colby Covington being ranked like 7th or 8th. And then when he got matched up against Tyron Woodley and did what he did, getting placed all the way up to 3rd or 2nd, it's like, okay, I mean, sure, I guess, but Gilbert and Kamaru have already proved that, like, that the game plan, like, to me, like, Tony wasn't the 3rd best lightweight when Beneil beat him, so it's kind of weird that Beneil took that spot. So because of that, I think its ranking is higher than his ceiling, in my opinion. I kind of hope not. I want to see him, persevere and keep going because, I mean, for all we know, this guy's going to be that Jan Blachowicz, that Charles Oliveira that really comes out of nowhere and shocks us all. Yeah. Based on the fights I've seen of his, even in the last year, while very exciting to most of them, I wouldn't put him in my top 5 probably. So I really wonder, I guess, what the UFC really plans for him. He's holding that number 3 spot, which they gave him for a reason. I mean, because Tony wasn't number 3 when he beat him.
He was 5 or 6. Yeah.
So that's why it's even more surprising that he jumped Conor. Just very surprising. So I almost wonder if he's there to almost give more credibility, perhaps against a future opponent like Islam Makhachev or something. Or Dos Anjos or whoever. Like, and I hate to talk that way, but, like, I don't think that it just seems there's a lot of factors that are a little odd in this one. So love Beneil. Hope he proves me wrong.
Oh,
because we were big supporters of his since we started this podcast and even before that.
Yeah.
And I kind of hate to root for a guy for so long to then just turn around and be like, all right, pal, you're out doing you've passed your expectations.
Yeah.
Time to take it back now. I don't know. I'm still going to root for the guy, just going to be in the back of my mind probably thinking, don't think it's going to go well.
Right.
But we'll see. Next one. This is another one that we've kind of touched on in our last This or That, which you can go check out. Got a lovely little thumbnail with a picture of Space Jam.
Yeah.
With some Tai Tuivasa.
That episode was all over the place.
I'm not going to lie, guys. I don't know if any of you have ever dropped acid, but that episode 120 of the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast sure felt like it.
Oh, boy.
Now, this question, I liked it so much because it was going around Twitter, circling around. The question being, what is your thrill and agony at this point in 2021? Thrill and agony is a lovely concept that the UFC has started implementing to really humanize their fighters, where it takes you behind the scenes and it shows you kind of obviously the lead up. You see the backstage, them preparing, but then after the fight, you see the winner celebrating, like up close and personal. You see the loser crying in the back, just so distraught.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, you hate to see it at the same time, but I think it's just a really good way to humanize your fighters.
Mm-hmm.
So what was circling around Twitter was for people to say what was their thrill and agony at this point in 2021 with like pictures. So like I used in that video, the thrill might be Francis Ngannou winning the title. It was a picture of Ngannou, and then the agony was like Tony Ferguson, a picture of him basically saying his descent into being kind of just another guy.
Right.
So, Dominic, what is your thrill and agony at this point in 2021?
Well, the agony's easy.
Yeah.
That's seeing Stipe, our guy. Here I go again. I keep turning the wrong way. I still don't know how to work this whole thing. He's up.
Look at that. There's Overeem.
I just picked my nose right there.
you always point at Overeem.
I'll figure it out one day. Seeing Stipe lose to Ngannou, of course, we love Francis Ngannou here. I'm going to be talking about him a little later in this episode, but I'll wait to hint what that's going to come by. But, seeing Stipe lose, man, especially the way he did, the brutal knockout, losing the belt, it was awful. But at the end of the day, it's got to happen at some point, right? He's on his way out. That's clear. He's 38 years old or 37, but the greatest heavyweight of all time can't take that away from him. But he's our Ohio boy, so that's definitely the agony so far. Hopefully, nothing's worse than that in 2021. The thrill. I'm going back and forth here in my head between two options. Charles Oliveira winning the lightweight strap, scratching, clawing his way from the deepest depths of this division and the missed weight cuts, the back and forth losses, to then out of nowhere string a 9-fight win streak and then knock out Michael Chandler to become the undisputed champion. Take the reins from Habib as he rides off into retirement, the newly crowned champion, Charles Oliveira. Can I just give my honorable mention just so they know what I was bouncing back and forth? It was that or Brandon Moreno winning the flyweight strap. That one felt special, man. Definitely the two most emotional title wins of the year so far, I got to say. But
both
Charles
made me tear up.
Oh, yeah. Man, just barely did Oliveira inch away and take the thrill so far for the year. And it's more so just because we've literally seen the man grow up in front of our eyes in the UFC, a guy that people counted out time and time again, wins the belt. So Charles Oliveira winning the belt for my thrill, Stipe Miocic losing the belt as my agony.
So those are mine. So because of that, I'm going to give two others.
Okay.
But those are my, I mean, you know that. Like, that Stipe losing his belt and Charles winning was – I didn't think going in if Charles won, like if you told me that this year that would be the case, I wouldn't have thought so, even though – I'm a fan of his, but you saw my reaction when he won the fight.
Man.
Yeah. But Moreno is definitely a close second as well. But again, you took it. So, I mean, even though it was an honorable mention. So I'm going to – I do have some more of those. So I didn't really think about this question too much. So I I might be missing some here, but for a thrill, an interesting one. Max Holloway's performance against Calvin Kattar. Because if you remember, Dominic, I predicted Calvin Kattar to win that fight.
Yeah.
Back when we were still making predictions, and now you guys see why we don't make them anymore because I make calls like that. I was just nervous. Max has just accumulated so many significant shots in his career due to his fighting style. That's very exciting. But because of that, even though he's still young, but you look at all his stats, you see him all the time where it's like he's got over double the accumulated significant shots that John Jones has and stuff like that. It's just like, man. And
how long can it last?
You keep waiting for the day where it all comes tumbling down. The guy's never been dropped, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And, you know that's not going to last forever. At least you would assume not.
Right.
So I'm not saying that was the fight that I thought was going to happen. I just thought there might be a chance that we would see Max go on a bit of a slide and then move to lightweight and then maybe not really ever be a champion again, but still be competitive and have some good fights. But, oh, my God.
I mean, it's one of the best performances in UFC history.
If you ever watched Dragon Ball Z, that man went to his next form. That man went Super Saiyan.
Yeah.
It was an awesome performance. It was an amazing fight, even though one-way traffic, that's that. But it was an awesome fight to watch. Kattar just had the heart of a lion and kept coming. But Max, I mean, some of the moments in that fight, like you guys all know the moments I'm talking about, when he's looking at the commentators going, I'm the best boxer in the UFC, and he's dodging and weaving punches he's not even looking, man. Like, come on.
Yeah.
To me, it's like he's lost twice to Volkanovski. And all the respect in the world to Volkanovski, and even though that second fight, asterisks, whatever, still, a win is a win. We've established that in this episode. He's lost twice to the champion, and after that fight, I'm still not convinced he isn't the best featherweight in the world.
Yeah, right.
And that's no disrespect to Volkanovski. It's just how can you look at that performance and not think that Max Holloway is the best fighter in the world?
And he's not even 30 years old.
Mm-hmm. So that's a thrill for me if I had to choose one that wasn't Charles or maybe Moreno. I think it's very close to Moreno, but Moreno has that emotional pull.
Yeah.
I watched it by myself and started crying. That's how
you were in the feels.
Even though I love Davison. Like, that's just crazy. For agony, it is Stipe, but man, I think an interesting one would be that for Cody Garbrandt.
That's what I figured.
And maybe that's obvious because for us Ohio guys, but I think it's more not so that he lost, but what the loss implicated. Because he had such a big bounce back with the Sun Sal. It was a highlight reel knockout in talks of like knockout of the year. And we're like, okay, he's back on track after that 3-fight losing streak. But that loss to Rob Font after his bout with COVID and all this.
Yeah.
It just kind of meant, well, no, maybe he's still just not the guy that he was when he beat Cruz. So to me, it was a tough pill to swallow to accept that, like, at least for now, Cody's he's not the division sort of passed him by at this point, as apparent by the fact that he's moving down the flyweight even at this. So that would probably be my thrill and agony if I had to pick a couple others. I'm trying to think of if there's any more. Alistair Overeem, funny enough that you pointed at him when you were talking about Stipe.
Yeah.
I was really liking his one last ride kind of thing where it's like, I'm going to get to that title shot, and then he got beat up by Volkov. And then
released.
Released. That was tough because I actually almost was rooting for him to get another title shot. Thankfully, once Ngannou won the belt, that will never happen again.
Yeah.
But still, he kind of made me believe a little bit. So maybe that's one. Another thrill, I think, is Ciryl Gane, his rise for me, because I've thought this guy could be a champion from literally the first time I watched him, which was
so fast.
Probably his second bout in the UFC was like the first time I watched him, and I was like, and I think he pulled off a submission or something, and I was like, all right, this guy's got the skills everywhere. Yeah. And it's just nice to see it. And now he's about to fight for an interim title this weekend. So he's at least proven us right in some ways there.
Right.
Next question. This one involves another prospect that we're going to be seeing hopefully here in the near future. Khamzat Chimaev. That's a name we ain't talked about in a long time, is it?
It's true.
I believe he is fighting in October against Li Jingliang. Knock on wood. Hopefully that all happens. But we know the kind of impact he made on the end of 2020. Fought 3 times in about a month and a half.
Yeah.
Looked dominant against iffy competition. I personally think his second opponent, and I forget his name, English fella.
Reese McKee.
Reese McKee, I believe. We both thought that kid actually had some potential. Unfortunately, he's not in the UFC anymore, I don't think. But his bout after that against Gerald Mearchart. Mearchart, while being a bit of a journeyman, is still, I think, a good step up for Khamzat at that point.
Yep.
However, with that win, the floodgates were open, and Khamzat was scheduled with Leon Edwards. And so obviously the potential for this guy, the ceiling, if I will go that far, is through the roof for this guy. And the company believes in him. The fans believe in him. They think this guy could be a problem in 2 different divisions, that being welterweight and middleweight. However, Dominic, we have 2 long-reigning dominant champions in those divisions. Mr. Kamaru Usman at welterweight and Israel Adesanya at middleweight. So my question is, if right now, sitting right here, what you know about Khamzat Chimaev, and based on what you, I guess, feel about his potential, who does he have a better chance to dethrone if he got there? Israel Adesanya at middleweight or Kamaru Usman at welterweight?
So, got to go with the gut, right? Instant reaction. I say Israel Adesanya simply because of the stylistic clash. We've seen Israel struggle with the grapplers, although he did fantastic against Marvin Vettori, showed the growth in his game in a very short amount of time from when he lost to Blachowicz when he tried to take the light heavyweight belt. However, there's a problem with me saying that because I feel that Khamzat's natural weight class is at 170, and I don't think he necessarily belongs at 185 because Israel Adesanya, you may take a look at a guy and say he's skinny. That's a thick boy. He's got some big legs. He's very long and rangy. He's very strong, and I think it flies under the radar. But then it's like, okay, well, if I'm saying this, then it's Khamzat versus Usman. I just don't see a damn person at 170 pounds beating Usman because this man has improved every single bout in every single aspect of his game. So again, if I have to answer gut reaction, just simply because of the styles, Khamzat and Izzy at 185, I think he could cause Izzy more problems than what he could Usman because I just feel like all of Khamzat's strengths, Usman can match and then some. So.
Interesting. I actually think I might go the other way, truthfully. And I think a lot of that is going to come down to I have yet to see, while we know that the Blachowicz effect was real in that Adesanya fight where his size was just too much. He was – and I don't want to take – I thought Blachowicz did his thing on the feet as well. But when it came to the grappling, Adesanya could not get out of from being on the bottom of a guy as big as Blachowicz. But at middleweight, I've yet to see a guy who can even really hold Adesanya down. Marvin Vettori him and Costa are the 2 biggest guys in this division in terms of their walking into the octagon weight. And Vettori took him down, but could not hold him down at all. Even got powered out of from the bottom. So because of that, I don't think Khamzat, I don't know if he'd be able to, I don't know if he's quite big enough to hold down someone like Adesanya and really be able to do much damage on the ground. So then that fight turns into a battle on the feet, which Khamzat, by the point he'd be fighting these 2, hopefully he would have either one, been brought along to where he can get better and develop, or 2, he's just going to show he's even better than we thought he is right now. But in terms of his ability on the feet, we know he's got the power, the one-punch power. He proved that. But I think his technical precision is much better than maybe people think. Maybe it's because of his heritage. Like people just assume he's just all grappling or whatnot. But because of that, I think I'm going to go with Usman because I think both of their skills very much kind of mirror one another.
Right.
But there's a chance that Khamzat might be better than Usman on
True.
one of those. And that's a big statement to say that.
Yeah.
Because of how good Usman's looked. And Usman is, in my opinion, probably the number one pound-for-pound fighter right now. So this is all based on matchup. Not that I think Usman is worse than Adesanya or anything like that. I just think that Khamzat could hurt Usman on the feet. But Usman could obviously do the same to him. And then based on their grappling, I mean, who's to say Khamzat's not a better grappler?
It's true.
Would I predict it? No. But it is, if he, let's say he goes in and starches Jing Liang, and then he gets matched up with a guy like Leon Edwards, and he does the same thing, and by that point, you're definitely going to be thinking this guy's for real.
Yeah.
Whether you think he's good enough to beat Usman or not is another story, but people might now be like, why are they even considering this? You guys just have forgotten about the end of 2020, what this guy was about ready to potentially do. It was Conor McGregor level, man.
Well, there's no telling where this guy could be right now if it weren't for him contracting COVID.
Such a shame.
We can only hope, right, that these lasting effects he's had are to the wayside now, and that we see him come out against Li Jingliang and have a great performance, because that's no easy fight, by the way. Li Jingliang is a dog. That's one of your boys.
The leech,
yes,
baby.
So that's no easy welcome back fight, but it is perfect for him. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Next one here, we're going to be going through some potential champ fights through the history of the UFC that never came to be. And then we're going to each give our predictions for them. We got 3 of them here. Dominic, I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on these 3. I think you saw the one that I think you made eye contact with the one. So let's go one by one. All right. So we'll start with a bout at featherweight. A prime Jose Aldo versus a prime Dominic Cruz. Or do you think that fight should be at bantamweight, considering Aldo ended up making the move? But I feel like people at the time would have assumed Cruz would fare better at featherweight than Aldo at bantamweight.
That's probably true.
So let's say featherweight. And who would you predict to win that fight?
Oh boy. Jose Aldo was something, man, but so was Cruz. But Cruz is going up to featherweight. But now Jose Aldo fights at bantamweight.
Do you feel like Cruz's speed might be a little slower? Maybe the footwork's not as good. And Aldo's got some, especially back then, his leg kicks were to die for, or to die under, if you will.
Yeah, mate. You know what? Honestly, that would have probably played kind of the biggest factor in that potential super fight, because if you can neutralize Cruz's movement, which really hardly anyone has ever done, but Aldo, especially prime time Aldo right here, if he would have been able to land those leg kicks, that would have been a huge X factor in that one. Yeah, I just think at this time when they both were champ, Jose Aldo was on top of the world. And I mean, it literally took a one punch, 13-second KO to put it all down.
Wasn't that a decade he held the title?
Yeah, he was undefeated for 10 years through obviously the multiple organizations through the UFC. I go Jose Aldo in that one. I think the power, being that it would have been in his weight class. Again, this is all hypothetical. We're assuming Cruz would have gone up. I think his power, his speed, even his precision back then, the leg kicks, I think it would have been able to get the best of Cruz. I would imagine it being a very close fight, honestly. Probably a 5-round war where Aldo kind of gets the best in a decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
these are hard.
I might agree. When originally I was going to go with Cruz when I was writing this, but then
you brought up the leg kicks, man.
But then when I brought up the leg kicks to you, I'm like, yeah, that is kind of a good. It would be interesting to see how Aldo would fare in terms of trying to catch Cruz. Could Cruz just basically run circles around Aldo to the point where even when Aldo tries to throw leg kicks, like Cruz is busting him up with the jab or something? That would be interesting. He's almost like, in that potential matchup, he's almost too unorthodox for his own good, because to counter those heavy leg kicks, you would want to have a really good jab or a good counter right or counter left to follow up and keep him at bay. But Cruz is so unorthodox that he'll keep his hands low or high or doesn't really have a pure boxing stance or anything, that I don't know if he would be able to do that as effective as some other guys would. So he would almost have to depend purely on his movement, which because of that, I don't know how much damage he would really be putting on Aldo. And based on that, maybe you get a boring fight, actually, in my opinion, where Aldo wins based on really just control, really, for the majority of it, octagon control. Also, Aldo does have some very underrated jiu-jitsu. Hasn't shown it that much in his career, but when he has, it's been very effective. Cruz, I would not call necessarily I wouldn't necessarily say he's a amazing jiu-jitsu practitioner.
We just don't see him get tested.
Yeah, exactly, because it's hard to get him there. I mean, that's a reality. But being at featherweight, maybe it slows him down just enough, and that was Aldo's fucking jungle, man. Yeah. So I'll go Aldo. I made myself switch my own answer. Can't believe it. Next one here. This was one that was scheduled at one point in time at UFC 196. Potentially, might still get it at some days. So looking more and more realistic every day that it could happen. Rafael dos Anjos, being the at the time lightweight champion, had beaten Anthony Pettis, who so many people thought would be a long reigning champion. And then he was going up against Conor McGregor, who, as you just mentioned, had just came off of the one-punch 13-second knockout of Jose Aldo, the king of Rio himself. And McGregor was looking to go up and win his second belt. We know he would eventually do that successfully, but it was against Eddie Alvarez after he had a couple Diaz fights. And obviously Eddie took the belt from Dos Anjos. But, so what do you think here? Because when I think of this fight at that time, it is so hard for me to imagine anybody beating Conor McGregor.
Yep.
Which is really a testament to how good him and the UFC was at really promoting him and obviously how good Conor looked at the time. I mean, I really just – when going into UFC 205, Eddie Alvarez is an amazing fighter. I went in knowing Conor McGregor was going to win.
Yeah, and then the performance he had was...
No doubt in my mind. I was like, Conor McGregor's winning this fight. Not just because at the time I was still new to it. I just literally was like, there's no chance that Eddie Alvarez wins this fight.
Yeah.
So, and you saw in the lead up, but because there was some press conferences on the road to UFC 196 when it was Dos Anjos and McGregor. McGregor was definitely, I don't know if I would say he was in Dos Anjos' head, but he was definitely getting the better of the verbal sparring, which is a lot to do with Conor just being a stronger English speaker, I guess. So what do you think in terms of when this fight got into the cage? What would we see?
You know, you look at the way RDA does kind of grind out his opponents, and you think it's a great stylistic matchup for RDA against a guy like Conor. But like you said, man, during this time, this version of Conor McGregor was special. And obviously, we know he lost the fight to Nate Diaz, but that was the short notice deal and all that hoopla. Then they ran it back. He won. Then he puts on one of the greatest performances ever against Eddie Alvarez to win the belt. I got to side with Conor here, man. I mean, this was a guy that was just starching everyone in his path. And even when he would face resistance, Chad Mendes, for example, he was able to withstand that and then still finish Chad Mendes, who is a horrible stylistic matchup for Conor. So I go Conor McGregor here, and I go Conor McGregor my finish because you got to think, Eddie Alvarez finished RDA up against the fence with a barrage of strikes, and he was able to kind of break his will. And I just think Conor's obviously the better precise striker. We saw that when they fought each other. So I would go Conor McGregor here, honestly, via like a KO, TKO, first or second round.
Yeah, that was going to be kind of my point for RDA was that the guy's never been dropped in his UFC career. But you did see in an Eddie Alvarez fight that he was out on his feet, essentially. Yeah. So McGregor could replicate that in some way. And you're right. Not only is he a more technical striker, I would say, than Eddie Alvarez, he's a more powerful striker.
Yeah.
Man, it's tough because, again, so much – there's a few things that really want me to believe RDA could have really done something there. But really, it's the X factor that, and I hate to use it because we're in our positions. We're supposed to be a little more analytical, a little more realistic based on skill sets and what you've actually seen out of these guys in the octagon. But Conor McGregor he was larger than life at the time, and somehow that almost is like a skill in itself.
Yeah.
I don't know if Dos Anjos would be ready for that. Eddie Alvarez wasn't. That guy had fought everywhere, small, big arenas everywhere. Would Dos Anjos be ready for that fight? He didn't look too bad in the press conferences. I mean, don't get me wrong. He was, red panty night and all that.
Yeah.
It was getting ugly. But a lot of that was more just because he's not the best English speaker.
Yeah.
I don't think he was necessarily fazed by the trash talk. So overall, I'm going to go Conor in a similar fashion to what you said. I would be most curious to see if he would drop Dos Anjos. At that time, my gut tells me yes, because it seemed like he did everything you thought he couldn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. Last one here.
You bastard.
This one's all Dom.
You sicko.
So this fight would be at middleweight.
Yeah.
And it would see two of the best fighters of all time, the long-standing welterweight champion, arguably, but in my opinion still, the best welterweight in UFC history, George St. Pierre, going up to challenge the middleweight GOAT, Anderson the Spider Silva, for his middleweight title. So, Dominic, I know where your head's probably at on this one, but I want to know how you got there. Where stylistically, why does Anderson Silva win this fight?
Like a 10, 11, 12-year-old Dom is just so excited right now because this is what he was growing up on. This was the talk of the town.
Such a shame.
Yeah, it is. This was the super fight of all super fights. The hype was there. The storylines were there, and it never happened. And, probably for the best because these guys cemented their own legacies and their own weight classes, and they're two of the greatest mixed martial artists to ever do it. They step in the octagon, mano a mano, at 185 pounds. Anderson Silva knocks out George St. Pierre. But this fight is very exciting because obviously we saw Anderson multiple times challenged by wrestlers. Chael Sonnen takes the top of that list. Of course, Chris Weidman as well and some others. But so in that aspect, GSP definitely could have caused issues. But in the stand-up realm, I don't think this fight would have been close. The size advantage for Anderson, I think, would be very drastic win this fight, obviously, in their primes. And I just think his striking at that point was just so much higher of a level than GSP. GSP was like a really technical boxer that always wanted to close the distance and then get the fight to the ground. But the distance striking of Anderson is unmatched to this day outside of someone like Israel Adesanya. Thank goodness we got to see those two fight, even though it wasn't Anderson's prime. And I truthfully think, and I'm being unbiased, I think Anderson would have won this fight then as a little boy. I'm saying it now as a 23-year-old. I think it would have been fun back and forth. I think Anderson would have been had to face adversity in this fight. But again, on the feet, every round starts on the feet, and I think that's all it would have taken for Silva to get a finish. So I would go Anderson via some sort of KO, TKO.
Wow, you go via finish?
Yeah, I do.
Wow, that's a bit surprising to me. Not that it's impossible. Obviously, Anderson Silva is fucking Anderson Silva. It's just I think for me, it's just hard to imagine. I know GSP, Matt Serra. You remember in our dorm room the first time I watched that. I'm gonna go the other way. So it's hard because I can't even imagine these two fighting each other.
Yeah.
And like they both have such a clear advantage over the other that it's so hard to really, because they're both two of the best of all time. Yep. So it's like maybe if they fought in 2011, one guy would win, and if they fought in 2012, the other guy would win. Because it seemed like even though they were dominant at the same time, depending on what period of time it was, and it varied, one guy was better than the other.
Yeah.
Obviously, when GSP and Anderson first won their belts, I would say Anderson was the better fighter at the time because GSP, obviously, he got knocked out by Matt Serra, had to kind of come back from that. But then when Anderson Silva kind of went through that lull in his career where, yes, he had the very highlight reel, amazing Matrix-looking finish over Forrest Griffin. He also had those weird fights with Talis Leites and
Damian Maia.
Even
Nick Diaz.
Yes. Now, the Nick Diaz one came a lot later.
Yeah.
So I'm meaning more at that time period.
I forgot.
Yes, the Forrest Griffin fight was amazing. One of the highlights of his career. But those two other fights that I just mentioned, in that period of time when GSP was beating the shit out of BJ Penn and who else?
Josh Koscheck.
Yeah, Josh jabbed the face off of Koscheck.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, I would think maybe GSP would win. And then if you go to the Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva rivalry, and then even when he fought Stephen Bonner, and that's when GSP fought Nick Diaz, and because of that, I would probably go with Silva again. So it's just like you kind of depends on the era almost. But all in all, I'm going to go with GSP when I evaluate all the factors, no matter what time period in that they're best. I think he would be able to get this fight to the ground. A lot of it turns into their fight IQs, which I don't want to say Anderson Silva has anything other than a exceptional fight IQ. However, he has been known to be a bit of a show off in the octagon.
Mm-hmm.
He can get a little too relaxed, as you saw the way he lost to Chris Weidman. So I think he would have some of that in this fight because I think he would know I'm the better striker than GSP. Yeah. And I just think because that GSP is such a gamer, a game planner. He comes in, his team puts together the best game plans. Also, his team, Faraz Sahabi, they're known for the fact that they will only take at most 2 fights a year because you need a pure 6 months to prepare your body for a fight. Like with that kind of preparation and that attention to detail, I believe they would have the game plan to potentially put on a maybe underwhelming overall fight, but a performance of a lifetime, I guess, for GSP. I think it would be a lot of grappling, a lot of trying to hold Anderson Silva down. Would he be able to do it with the fact he's going up in weight? I thought he looked pretty good. I mean, if you look at when he fought Bisping, it's kind of a weird example because he was dealing with the stomach issues and whatnot. But I thought he looked big at middleweight, so I think maybe he could hold Anderson down. But you never know. That fight would be. That's a shame that fight never got to be ran. And,
it really is.
Yeah. So now we got a couple more here. And these are actually ones that Dominic found here at the end. So we start with this one I love. I love this one. I believe you found this on the UFC's Instagram.
UFC BT Sport. But yeah.
So I want you all to imagine the UFC had a draft. And they said, below average Joes, we're doing a brand split. That's right, baby. The UFC
SmackDown
is going
versus Raw.
UFC is going 2002 WWE and saying, Dominic, you're going to be the general manager of one half of the UFC, and Noah, you're going to be the general manager of the other half. If they said that, which my God, if they did. The question here is, who would be our or yours or then mine first pick based on their current status in the UFC and their overall potential? I love this question. I love never mind. I'll talk to you about it off camera.
Okay. So this is another one where I was sitting around today and I was really thinking, do I go with the current champion? Do I go with a young rising prospect with a lot of future upside? Do I meet in the middle, find a champion that's relatively new with a lot of upside?
Can I ask you and I'll see what you think of this question, and then we'll go from there. By the fact that what I just said, like us running our show, basically like drafting, and this is essentially the person we're going to depend on for the next few years to be like a huge contributor, right?
Yeah.
So that's an element as well. Obviously,
Yeah.
that goes into their potential, but star power, I guess, would have a factor here as well for some people.
So after minutes and minutes and maybe even hours of hours, it's been a long day of thinking, I settled on the UFC heavyweight champion of the world with the first pick of the Below Average Joe's UFC draft. Team Dominic selects Francis Ngannou. And, he has been looked at as a star ever since he stepped foot in the octagon. He's finished every single fight that he's won in the UFC and almost in his entire career. I think he actually has finished every fight in his career, 14 out of 15 or something crazy. In the UFC, though, he's won every fight by a finish. He can even submit guys, for God's sake, with a Kimura. How many heavyweights you see pulling off Kimuras? Anyways, and, I think his backstory is one of the most spectacular, unique, one-off stories you'll ever see in not only UFC history, not only MMA history, but sports history as a whole. And, fighting, inching, and clawing literally to make his way to freedom and get across the ocean, to Paris, where he came from very humble beginnings in Africa. And then he trains in a very, very small town, in a small camp in France, and then works his way into becoming a star. He fights for the title, gets dominated, and his hype training is utterly shut down, comes to a halt when Stipe beat him the first time, then bounces back, gets 4 straight wins, all via first-round KO, then caps it off this past March in my agony of 2021 so far by knocking out Stipe. I just think he's a special talent. He's a special, genuine human being. I don't know if you saw, or anyone listening, he got the Black Panther Award from Marvel as well for like his character and what he's done through sport and his story. So I just think he's one of the most special human beings that's really ever existed in combat sports and really all huge professional sports. And I think he is a star in the making. I think he's already a star, but it's someone that could become that level of, not a Conor, because that's a one-off, but I think he could really get close to a Diaz, a Masvidal, Israel Adesanya. I think he's kind of close with Izzy right now, and Izzy's a pretty big star.
UFC's version of Mike Tyson.
Yes. And when a guy can come in and one-punch KO people, that helps even more so. So, again, I thought about this for a while. I had a couple in mind, but I settled on Francis Ngannou.
So when you sent me this question a couple days ago, my mind immediately went to welterweight champion Kamaru Usman. However, he is 34 years old.
So is Francis.
Is Francis really 34?
Yeah.
Neither one of those guys look like they're slowing down anytime soon. But it is an added element, at least in my head. So when I look at some other potential names, really, because I'm going to not go with Ngannou since you did. Not that Usman was still the name I went to first, but like if you went beyond that, Ngannou would obviously be one of the next couple that would jump out. But as terms of some other names that would be really interesting, even if they're not necessarily going to be these huge pay-per-view stars. I mean, Peter Yan would be really high up there for me. I believe 30 years old or 31, somewhere in there. Actually, I'm gonna go. I don't think you're ready for this one. Here's who my first pick would be. Okay. Someone who I think what I love about this individual is that I think that they're young enough to be a big deal for a long time. They're good enough to win titles, as proven by their past, but they're not necessarily dominant. So they're kind of going to always be in the mix, but not necessarily a long reigning champion maybe. That's going to be current women's strawweight champion, Rose Namajunas.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And a lot of this goes into her last performance. I mean, that was a star-making performance out of her. If Wei Li had won that fight, she might be my first pick just because she does carry that Asian market, and they are very committed to their fighters that represent them. Sean O'Malley is another one that was up there. just in terms of potential.
And
Khamzat
star
Chimaev,
power.
Khamzat Chimaev could be up there for a lot of people. But Rose Namajunas was one that I was like sitting there. I'm like, she's young. She's obviously got the championship pedigree,
Right.
but she's not really, because not that I think dominant champions are bad for the sport or anything, but I do want some parity in my promotion if I'm starting out. And because of that, I want someone who people respect as a champion, whether they have the belt or not. It seems like she's kind of crossed that threshold to where even if she's not the champion, people just think she's the best ever. I mean, it's Thug Rose, it's all that. So Rose Namajunas, not the pick I thought I would make.
I like it.
I'm standing by it.
I respect it.
Now we got our last one before our fan question.
Yep.
And this is another interesting one. If the UFC made a card that only featured rematches, who would you want on it? And I have not really thought about this question since you sent it to me. So let's go kind of one by one, maybe. We
might be able to kind of build our own here.
Yeah, just kind of put some out there. Was there ones that stuck out to you right away?
There definitely are a few. Shout out to MMA Gone Wild, by the way. This is where he's the father of MMA Twitter, so had to give him a shout out. I saw him tweet this. I'm like, dude, this is a really sweet one. So Conor Nate, the trilogy, I think is obviously a huge one. Some others I had in mind, and one we're about to get, Usman Covington 2. Another one we're probably going to get, Whitaker and Israel Adesanya, Part 2. Mm-hmm. Those were definitely.
That's funny that your mind went kind of straight to, at least there. I know you're just kind of talking of ones at the top of your head. You went to like the title fights and then obviously like a Conor fight. I'm for some reason I'm thinking of like all these fights that had no title implications at all. I don't know why that's where my mind went.
Bring him in.
Sandhagen, Sterling, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. That's not really like it just because I think if Sterling loses to Jan, I feel like that's a fight that's just gonna have to be run back. Another one that I think I was going somewhere. Oh, I don't know if it wouldn't make sense now to do it, but like Blachowicz Santos.
Yeah.
Because Santos did knock out Blachowicz in the first fight. I wish Santos was on a better terms in his career right now to make that make sense, but that could be interesting. I'm trying to think of what are some other guys that have just had some.
Can I throw out a low-key sleeper?
Yeah.
This is one that's going to be like really off guard, and maybe it doesn't really fit in right now, but could happen in the future. It's a fight that ended in somewhat not controversy, but just weird fashion. That could have been a great fight. Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira 2. That is a fight.
That's for sure some controversy, though. I mean,
what was it? Esophagus injury.
Yeah, his esophagus. He couldn't even breathe.
Yeah. So imagine, I mean, you look at what those guys have done since then. It's obviously Charles, but then Max went on to become a champion. I think that's a really low-key one that I had to really think, okay, who's fault? And I was looking at Max's Sherdog. I'm like, oh, my gosh. He did fight Oliveira forever ago.
I had to give you a little slow clap. Conor McGregor, Max Holloway would be another one.
At lightweight.
At lightweight, yes. Which I think is also, that's kind of a key to, when you have those added elements. Why do we need to see the fight again? Sure, for Holloway, McGregor, the fact that it's been so many years and they went on to both have very good runs in the company, but also the fact to be at another weight class is another element.
Right.
Here's an interesting one. A bit of cross promotion.
Okay.
Petr Yan and Magomedov.
We got to see the trilogy bout. We do. Both guys have one loss, and it's to each other. So
yeah. Man, these are some. Did Eddie Alvarez fought Michael Chandler in Bellator, didn't he?
They had one of the best fights in Bellator history. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for saying that when I asked. Shows my noob status with Bellator. Well, Eddie's kind of fallen on some hard times, but I think him and Chandler could have a lot of fun maybe in the lead up. Both guys that talk the talk and walk the walk.
Yeah. I pulled up the tweet just now, and I'm kind of scrolling through to look at some others that we haven't necessarily discussed, and I'll just
Let me just say one real quick before
go ahead.
Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier.
That I'm seeing that a lot on here.
Yeah.
Gaethje Poirier 2, Max Ortega 2, a trilogy between Stipe and Francis is another kind of a good one. Here's one that might tickle your fancy a little bit here. John Jones versus Dominic Reyes 2, someone says on here.
That's interesting because I think I've said this on this podcast, and again, I'm not saying I wouldn't want to see it again because I want to see if my evaluation of that fight would turn out to be true. But I think John Jones, people would be disappointed at how easy I think John might make it look in a second time with Dominic Reyes. And that's not, and I said that when Reyes won the first fight, but the judges didn't score it for him. Yeah. I just think that John, I think when he wants to be the best fighter in the octagon, he will be. I just think he's that good. I just think he, I don't know, something about some of those performances with Santos and stuff, he just doesn't seem to doesn't put his all into it or something. But that's a side point.
I found one more. I have to bring it up. This is the only person that actually said it, shockingly enough, so I'm actually going to give credit here. At MMA Tucker 7. This should have came to mind first. Ladies and gentlemen, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Zhang Wei Li. I mean, come on now.
Yeah. Yep. That is definitely
got to be 5-round main event.
Miesha Tate, Holly Holm.
Yeah, that's one you've talked about recently.
There was one I just thought of, and then I lost it when we
this is the longest fight card in history of UFC.
Well, I
guess
too
hard to limit to 5.
Yeah, I guess in that way, we're just kind of throwing names out here. I just had one that I thought was pretty good, and then I lost it. But yeah, that was there's a lot of
Moreno, Askar Askarov.
Yeah. Ooh, Moreno, Brandon Royval.
Yeah. I think even Moreno Pantoja. I think they fought before too, and we know how good Pantoja's looked recently. I think they fought before. I could be wrong on that one.
Oh, I think I just thought of it. Oh yeah, Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz.
Really? Okay. I'm not opposed to that.
They're kind of Cody's falling on hard times. Yeah. Dominic's kind of on his way back up now.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see if Cody could he make magic happen twice. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there any more? I want to make sure we don't miss any before we might get roasted if we miss some good ones here. I don't know. No, that might be it. Amanda Nunes, Chris Cyborg.
So yeah, Nunes and Cyborg. We've seen what Chris has done since that loss. She's not lost since, obviously. She's a Bellator champ now. I mean, you could always run the trilogy between Volkanovski and Holloway even. Yeah. I know.
Well, I mean, most everybody wants to see it, though.
Yeah.
Just for Max Holloway, I guess, to see if he can prove that, no, I should have gotten a victory in the second one,
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is outside of the UFC, I guess, but, I mean, we talked about it on Monday, McKee and Patricio Pitbull running it back again, but this time for 155.
Yeah. How do you not do that fight again? Yeah, I guess that's probably what we'll leave that one.
Wow. How many did we just say?
I'd like to hear some people leave their thoughts on that one.
Yeah, please do.
That for sure. Now, Dominic, we're on to our viewer submission.
Last but not least.
Submitted question, however we want to word it. From Michael. Dominic, I'm going to let you take it away since you have it in front of you.
Yeah, so it's kind of a two-parter, so I'm just going to read from my phone. So, question, again, from Michael. Submitted via Facebook, by the way. It doesn't have to be a voice message if you don't want it to be. Do you think the UFC will ever have something similar to the NFL Sunday ticket? For example, pay X amount of dollars, and you have access to all cards. Obviously, that means the fight nights, which you get with ESPN+. But if you have ESPN+, right now, you still have to buy the pay-per-views. But if they were to do something like this, a package deal per se, you can get all the fight nights and all the pay-per-views for one big bundle. And do we think that this is something that should happen? Michael goes on to personally say, I would do this rather than spending $70 a month, I would do a package like this for sure. He thinks it could even maybe cut down on some of the illegal streamer numbers. We know how Uncle Dana is with the streamers these days. So kind of a two-parter there. Again, shout out to Michael for the good question. That's 2 questions he's submitted to be on the Reddit Roundtables back-to-back episodes, I think. And this is something that Noah and I think we've discussed this a little bit a while ago. And I think this is definitely something that I would want to see happen. Is it something the UFC would probably consider, and ESPN more so probably than the UFC? Probably not, unfortunately. But and I did the math. I'll go ahead and pull it up again. But if you just average, say there's one a month, 12 pay-per-views times $70, that's before tax, that's $840. So with Michael's thing here, comparing it to like a Sunday ticket, say you do an annual fee, $500, and you get every card, every pay-per-view, all that fun stuff with ESPN Plus. And I took it a step further before we started recording and talking with Noah. And instead of just like one big $500 thing, what if you essentially do a tiered ESPN Plus subscription, like a UFC fan bundle package, whatever? So like right now it's $5 or $6 for ESPN Plus. But we were talking earlier, bump that to what if you do $30 a month or $40 a month you pay to have your ESPN Plus subscription. So you get all the normal stuff, non-UFC related. Then, of course, you get the library of UFC fights. You get all the fight nights. And you get every pay-per-view every month for $30 to $40 a month as well. So just kind of something like that. I think it's an amazing idea. I think it would be something that could bring in more casual fans while still keeping hardcore fans like us around. And I just rambled a really long time, but I'm giving you what I'm thinking. Noah, let the people know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of if they should do it, they probably should. I don't know how it would work. You know, again, we're not, even though we're a couple of
business,
we're a couple of businessmen, but we're not business men. I don't know. Didn't really work, but basically, in my head, everything's going to streaming nowadays. So in some ways, the NFL ticket needs to be kind of updated, because isn't that an add-on for cable?
Yeah, I think so. It's something similar kind of how Red Zone is too.
Yeah, so I think they need to have – I think the NFL needs to kind of even get with the times, and that shows how behind the UFC is when they're still using the pay-per-view model.
Yeah.
Funny enough, today we just saw that UFC 267 in October looks like it might be airing on ABC.
Which is amazing.
Which is awesome. That's quite the throwback to like the 80s when you had ABC boxing.
Yeah, it's huge.
Or maybe, I don't know if even maybe the 70s before that, I don't know. Muhammad Ali was big back in those days, and people didn't have to pay to watch Muhammad Ali fight. Isn't that crazy? Besides their cable bill, I guess. So I think that I like where your head's at, Michael, and I think that it is a good idea, because ultimately we are, for us, Dominic, it's a no-brainer to pay the $70 a month. But you look at some of these cards in a year, and are they necessarily worth $70? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, when you evaluate a Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier card, the same as, or a 3 title fight card, as the same as the card maybe this Saturday to a lot of people, which has the one interim title fight that most people don't really think should be for a title.
Yeah.
Sure, are there a lot of good fights on there? Yes, but in terms of name value and whatnot, a lot of people are going to be like, why is this the same amount of money? So you have the majority of the MMA, people who consider themselves fans of MMA, probably don't buy more than 3 or 4 cards a year.
Yeah.
The rest they try to either just follow on like Twitter and stuff.
Stream it.
Yeah, or illegally stream it. Get those live updates or whatever on Twitter. But because of that, I think it would be in the best interest, and you do a monthly fee, but it basically would maybe be the equivalent of buying 6 pay-per-views a year or something.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's got to be kind of in the UFC's interest to do it. So it's like, okay, they have to be able to make money off of it. What's weird is like WWE did something like this. This is a lot different, but for a while they had WWE Network, which is now on Peacock, which is like the NBC streaming. But so now it's even crazier. But before, WWE Network, I believe, was $10 a month. You paid $10 a month to get the entire library of like you watch any of this original content and old shows, anything, old pay-per-views, anything you want, and you got the new pay-per-views under that deal. That's $10 a month, Dominic.
That's crazy.
And you know, WWE, their pay-per-views were always, I don't know, $50 or something.
$60, yeah.
So you paid $120 a year for the equivalent of 2.5 pay-per-views.
Yeah.
But you got all 12 or 13 of them in a year, and you got an entire library to go through, which WWE has done a great job with their original programming, their documentaries. So I don't know how they made it work, but they did. Yeah. And their pay-per-views have always sold much higher than like the UFC. UFC's
on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, like think of like their attendance is always much higher. You know, each Raw and SmackDown, I believe, will do, and they do it every week, is around, I might be off on this, I think like 30,000 or something, 35,000.
Depending on the arena.
Yeah, so, you know, I think like, you know, UFC is doing like 10 to 20 in there most time on their fight nights. And that's, so because of that, I don't know how it would compare, but it's so interesting to me that WWE always did that. When like, to me, I'm like, you have to be, like, that's got to be a financial gamble to do that.
Yeah.
But they did it. So obviously they've made money off of it.
Right.
So then I'd wonder, and it ended up being a big success. I mean, I think the UFC or WWE was kind of in a lull at the point where they introduced the network, and I think it became a big hit, brought a lot of fans back and just a lot of fans in general to the product. So I think the UFC should consider doing something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I just don't know if they ever will.
And the problem is now it's not only on the UFC, they would have to do it with ESPN,
which is kind of which I even said off camera is kind of the boring answer, where it's like, well, let's see what those ESPN contracts say, because you ain't going to be able to get off of ESPN Plus, because that's and I want to talk negatively about the ESPN deal.
Because that's been
like it. I like it. I enjoy. A lot of people don't, but I like being able. I already have ESPN Plus anyways. So being able to go through that for a lot of my UFC content, buy the pay-per-views off there, I'm fine with it as long as it works, you know, which sometimes has been a problem, but that's besides the point. I just think streaming would be the way you would do it. I don't know if I know where you're getting at with the Sunday NFL ticket. That's basically what you're saying, is just basically paying more up front, but less over the course of a year for all of these cards. And yes, I think you should see something like that, but I think it's going to be a long time before you do, because combat sports are just falling way behind in terms of they stick to the pay-per-view model, which sometimes they reap the benefits of, but I think somewhere 10, 15 years it might even be. Yeah. You'll eventually see something, but it just might take a lot longer than we want to. Like the question, though. Very good question. Dominic, any final thoughts on that one?
That's it, man.
Well, everybody, thank you for joining us for today's edition of the MMA Reddit Roundtable. I didn't even pay attention to the time up there in the corner.
This is one of our longest episodes ever.
We've gone for quite a while. Friday, be sure to check back in with us. We'll have the MMA weekend preview for you. UFC 265 going to be a big focus of that one, along with all of the Okamoto bombs that have been getting dropped over the last 24 hours. A lot of fights to go over on that one, a lot of big fights. So if you've been living under a rock and ain't seen them, tune in Friday.
We'll have you covered. Yeah.
We'll give you the scoop. But Dominic, until then, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at @dslee14. More importantly, like our good friend Michael, engage with the podcast. Follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, @BAJ_MMA podcast. Never forget the underscore.
And for me, Twitter, Instagram, @NTBaker_.
Yes.
Don't forget the underscore. Again, that's NTBaker_. On Twitter and Instagram. But that's it. We're out. And we'll see y'all on Friday.